Hello and welcome to another edition of Office Hours with the Practical Prof and friends. It's been a while, but I'm glad to be back. You'll notice that this month's edition of the podcast and the video interview are going to coincide also with the topic in the Business Weekly for May. I believe it's May 18 and May 25. So I've been doing this podcast for about a year and a half now, off and on. Not every month, but sporadically. And I purposely called it Office Hours with Practical Prof and Friends because I realize how many true friends I have who are really talented and really excellent subject matter experts on different topics. And today is certainly another example of that. With our guest is going to be Tracy Grajewski, and she's currently the Chief Human Resources Officer, and she's an adjunct instructor also at Juniata College. And I have known Tracy for more years than I'm going to share. And we look the same as we did when we first connected, way back through various volunteer and community activities. But I just want to read some of her. She's got a really wonderful background in pharmaceutical companies and healthcare, and most recently, as I said, higher ed. And she is a certified retirement coach and authorized partner for Predictive Index and 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team. As I said, she's at Juniata, but she's also an alumna and had served as an alumni trustee and class fund agent. And she's a member of the CPU-HR, which I'm going to have to ask her about because I don't know that organization, but I do know SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. So let me introduce you and welcome Tracy Grajewski, and I'll ask her to start her video and we'll get started.
Hi, Santo.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks for being with us today.
I'm delighted to do so.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm really excited about this topic. And tell me what the CUPA thingy is.
Yeah, so that's College and University Professionals Association, and we're members of the HR part of that. That's where we get all our nice compensation data and information about human resources practices in higher education.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that. It's always good for the host to know what he's talking about. And sometimes that even happens here. I'm taking this is the follow-up to the article. So this will be in print as well as in the podcast and blasted on the YouTube channel. So I'm taking the point of view with collaboration, which is the topic, that we have way too much competition and not enough collaboration. And that's just my personal bias. But I wanted to start off by kind of, first of all, getting your sense of what do you see collaboration being? What does it look like to you? And then what do you think about that comment about competition?
Yeah. So to me, collaboration is kind of like sort of like what we're modeling right now, right? We are working together on something. Certainly, although I think it's a bit different, that view of competition is a bit different in higher education than it is in other industries. But we work at two institutions that are competing for talent, right? For student talent, for faculty and administrator talent, right? But yet you and I can work together and produce a product that provides something to the world, a point of view and so forth. And we can do that without the boundaries of misrepresenting our organizations or one organization looking better than the other. We can just come together and produce something that's jointly created. And I think there's a lot of strength and power in that, as opposed to, producing something alone in a vacuum and then trying to bring that forward in a highly, competitive landscape of information.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking benchmarking came across because, it's like that was a concept no longer cutting edge, but I mean it's still it's important. And that idea that you actually would talk to competitors about different strategies because they're willing to help. They may do something better than you, and you do something better than them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that solving a common problem is a perfect fertile ground for collaborations, right? So COVID for me was a great example of that, where I don't think that, it was important that Susquehanna or Moravian or Juniata did better at COVID than one another, right? That wasn't the thing. We were
right.
trying to solve a problem that was common to all of us, and trying to do that in a way that was in service of student populations and parents and employees, et cetera. So it was a great place for collaboration. We were on the phone, pretty frequently trying to understand what others are doing. And I think that there are a lot of cases where that is absolutely appropriate and a best approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I can't remember where, but within a day ago, I think somebody's email tag or something, there was an African proverb, and it's really fortuitous that it came up. And it said, if you want to do something fast, do it alone. If you want to do something well, go together.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's
makes
like,
a lot of sense.
yeah, we get these messages when we need them,
Right.
and when we're looking for it. So I thought that was really cool. So I think it's pretty obvious the difference between competition and collaboration. What might not be so obvious to listeners or viewers is this idea of cooperation versus collaboration. And I think it's a subtle difference, but how do you understand it? And I'll chime in with my thought.
Yeah, yeah. So to me, like collaboration is to produce something. Like something comes out of a collaboration, whether that's a research project or furthering of knowledge, advancing of knowledge, the creation of something. So I feel like there's an end product, whereas cooperation is slightly more passive, right? Like you may ask for someone's cooperation, and that just means they don't block you. Right? That could be cooperation, but that doesn't mean you mutually produce something or you further or advance an idea. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I like the way you frame it. Not getting in my way,
Right. Or yeah,
right?
getting out of my way, or vote thumbs up on this. And you might not even care about it at all, but I need your voice, right?
Right.
I need to say, hey, someone at Moravian College thinks is a good idea,
Right.
and you don't really, it doesn't cost you anything to do it, right? No time, no energy. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. I'm remembering, and I'm sure you will from teaching. It was I can't remember who to credit, but it was this conflict management style, and it was a matrix or an axis between the level and amount of cooperation and the level and amount of assertiveness.
Mm,
So if you're going to really assert yourself and have no level of cooperation, it was competing. But
uh-huh.
if you're going to be fully cooperative and fully assertive, it was collaboration.
Yeah.
In that mix, and so it does. I think we've seen it come up in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. So, I think one of the things, there's lots of great business theory and management theory that is easily implemented, but we don't always do it. And I think there's certain obstacles or challenges. What do you find have been the reasons that teams or employees don't collaborate?
Well, sometimes it's expediency, as you've suggested. I just need to get it done fast. I just need to submit this, whatever. Sometimes it's politics. It's garnering the boss's favor. And want to be first to market with this. With the boss that it's my idea. Which is somewhat competitive, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think some people are threatened by additional information, you know, or a different point of view. They're threatened by it, right? Because it might suggest that I don't know everything there is to know in the world about a topic, right? Whereas you know, like I tend to be from the position is I clearly don't know enough about this. I need, you know, I need other people's thinking. I think that there are segments of the world that just don't frankly care about anyone else's input, you know, and want to see the world a singular way because it's easier for them, right?
Mm,
Whereas when you introduce diversity of thought or some type of, you know, a creative process, it takes energy, you know, and if you're not willing to spend that energy, you know, or seek to understand another point of view, which to me is, you know, a great synthesis point, you know, you don't spend as much energy, you know, so maybe there's a laziness to it, maybe, you know, that prevents it from happening. And then I think sometimes there's just naivete, right?
yeah,
That someone else could possibly help you. Like I know, you know, it's really funny when you change organizations, you know, there's a couple different ways when that you come in. Some places you come in as like the ultimate expert in this thing, right? And so you get too much credit, right? And then other places when you come in as a new employee, it's like, well, you couldn't possibly know how we do this here, you know? And so, you know, so having been a new entrant into new industries, you know, collaboration has been essential. It's been essential for me to seek collaboration because you're right. I don't know how some points of HR are done in higher education, you know, compared to industry. And quite frankly, I'm still learning that. So
yeah, yeah.
different
It's a
ball
different
game.
world, isn't it?
Sure is. Sure is. In a
Same
good
ch
way.
same kind of challenges, but different stakes.
Yeah, different stakes and stakeholders, you know, and different constructs around employment, right?
Yeah,
You know, certainly faculty is different, you know,
yeah,
in terms of how they're paid, how that, you know, how they work, et cetera. So, you know, you just have to come in. Like I had to seek collaboration coming into an industry that was so different for me.
yeah, yeah. It's how you succeed too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you know, I like to say, especially when a person comes into a new situation, you know, are they going to, you know, my favorite film is Apollo 13, right? Are they gonna come in the atmosphere or are they gonna skip off the atmosphere? And, you know,
Right.
when people come in hot, they tend to skip off the atmosphere. And to me, that's all about your approach and your approach to cooperation and collaboration.
Yeah. I I can't help but think, a lot of this is the organization's responsibility for creating a culture where
Mhm.
collaboration is not only okay, but it's
Expected.
encouraged. Expected, exactly. Better than encouraged,
Yeah, yeah,
expected.
yeah.
Eh, and it's whether it's ego or control, like you said, or even just fear that
Mhm.
if I don't, show up and show up well, that I will get lost or not be promoted or not be, kids, students say this all the time. Employees I've seen, say this as well, that they fear that
Mhm.
they'll miss out or they won't get the credit because it's a team, effort.
Mhm.
So you have a really cool background because you've had so many years in corporate with banking and pharmaceuticals and then this next chapter that you're currently in of your career being in the not-for-profit sector. So I guess
Mhm.
my next question is organically, is that it's natural? Is it seem to be more natural or organic in either of those sectors?
Um, well, you know, again, it just depends on the problem you're trying to solve, you know. I find that, you know, and maybe it's my own, you know, my own place, right? Is, you know, that there seem to have um, been certain topics where like cooperation, collaboration not required, right? You know, even the like the signs of culture, you know, that you might expect, like the recognition programs they separate versus bring together, right? And it's been one of the things that I've been introducing as an idea, new idea, is that, like, do we really have to have like a separate faculty retirement dinner from a staff retirement dinner? Why don't we have a retirement dinner for everybody, right? Because the more that you practice those rituals and continue, it reinforces separatism versus let's come together and do this together. And I'm not sure that they were ever intentional from the get-go, right? But when we talk about how now, as higher ed is in a highly competitive environment, and not just with one another, but around whether higher education has a value at all for people, and is it worth the cost? And like, there's a lot of external environmental factors that are challenging our industry. And so I think each institution, has started to recognize the importance of a cohesive culture and an environment that feels, collaborative and in a community. And, so it's stepped us back to look at how do we pull that off? Because certainly, like, one part of the organization can't operate without the other, right? We're all the college, right? We're all the
Right.
institution. And I think people embrace that. That's how they want to feel, right? It just wasn't as crucial in the past, right?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, admittedly, my bias, because I've spent most of my career in the not-for-profit sector. You've spent what most of your career in the for-profit sector.
Yep, yep.
Um, so either it's my opinion or my rose-colored or different colored glasses that suggest. But the companies I've worked with in consulting, I've always found them to be more or much less willing than a not-for-profit who don't have really high resource stakes, or they don't have a lot of resources. So their attitude is always, we're in this together, and the only way we're going to accomplish anything is together. Now, I don't know if in practice they're better, but they certainly in intention and in vision seem to be more attuned. I think even Peter Drucker might agree that they seem to be more in tuned with this culture of collaboration.
Yeah, well, I think also a difference I would point out that I've observed for nonprofits, and I think colleges and universities, they are certainly by tax law nonprofits, but
Mm-hmm.
there's an interesting financial model, right? And sustainable financial model in higher education. But what I would say, is another observation I'd make, is that there's much more identification with the mission in nonprofits, right? Especially like the small nonprofits that you and I are familiar with, that we've worked together in the past. They're together around a common purpose, and usually that common purpose is doing good, like
Mm-hmm.
helping people, human services, or building community infrastructure or leadership or whatever. And so people align to that purpose and set more differences aside. I feel, when you're in a for-profit situation, that tends to be one of the highest objectives, is for profit, right?
Right.
Right. And so the things that you do have to have an efficiency factor, right, that generate value. That's a requirement. But it's certainly something that I think can, you can see less collaborative environments show up in nonprofits when people have a different view of what the mission should be. Oh, we should help children. No, we should help the
Yeah.
elderly.
Yeah.
Oh, we should help special needs children. No, children in general. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
sometimes you see some divergence
Well,
like
and then
that.
when you're kind of transposing that on a company that might happen to be a conglomerate or a multifaceted company, then it's like, which part of the mission do we
Right.
have allegiance to? I
Right.
I've often, I mean, I have, full disclosure, I always have had a bias against sales and could never, I so much of what I do in the past has been promoting, but it's I would never say it's sales.
Right.
And part of the reason I get so frustrated with it is that the silo concepts of everybody is against each other in the sales organization is and the antithesis of collaborating.
Oh yeah.
And I don't, I sales experts might tell me I'm wrong, and but I can't imagine that it's more effective to compete than to collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you're selling, like if you're selling something, like if you're selling at the wholesale level, let's say, if you're selling to another company, business to business, right? Then it's more complex, right? And you need more people to come together to make it happen, right? But if you are responsible for just selling your own thing, I did some work in executive search once, and I'll use this as an example. And so, obviously part of our work was filling jobs, right? It was finding the candidates for the job. So there was an element of sales in that, but you had you had to go out and get your own business, right? And so I was asked to lead a practice, the HR practice for a search firm. And I thought, well, this is going to be fun. I get to collaborate with all these people all around the world, which we did. We'd have meetings together and whatever. But when it came down to selling searches, the way the financial rewards followed those sales completely disincented anyone to say, hey, Tracy, you would be the best expert at doing this search. You take this search, right? Because the way the money was allocated to who did what in reward for completing that search or finding that search, like totally disincented the collaboration. So people were like great to sit around on a Zoom call, and because this was global, and have a nice chat with one another, but they weren't really willing to collaborate to get a sale, right? Because there were winners and losers in that, compensation wise. They weren't bad people, they were
No.
just following the rewards.
Well, and they could have restructured the rewards.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that, of course, being an HR person for the HR practice, I was kind of like, why do we do this? But then that was just a whole other kettle of fish, right? Because it had implications across all the other practices, and people were like, that's a bad idea.
Right.
And, like you had country managers, it was complex. It was pretty complex. So it was
Well,
fun, but it was a learning.
the bottom line was people were afraid that they were going to lose.
Yeah, it was like zero sum, and that's like, even practically speaking, that's what the outcome would have been for some people, you know.
This notion of a kind of a fixed pie, and we get a slice, and if I get a bigger slice, you get a smaller slice. It
Yeah.
doesn't help. It
Yeah.
just works
No,
against.
I think that's absolutely right. And then, when you talk about like, how does that play out in society, right? And in cultures, we're very much an individualist culture here in the US. And so this idea of competition that you've introduced, it's kind of what we expect, right? In our society, that there, are, for better or worse, like, our, winners and losers, right? That's just how it is. And I think we've probably seen a lot of that lately, of the way that certain things have played out. And whereas you don't see, you see people doing collectivist activity in other places, right? Where, the reward is spread more
Yeah.
evenly.
I didn't have this on our conversation talking points, but I'm curious. It just came to me, because we started to talk about COVID, and I read in the last few days in prep for this column that the focus is gone from COVID collaboration to kind of shifting back to the company and production and sales and revenue and et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think about this? I think, I mean, COVID was a horrible experience in so many levels,
Yes.
And
Exhausting, yes.
right. And at the same time, there are some really gems that we're going to take with us going forward. And I think one of them is around collaboration, in that we were forced to pull it together in ways that we've never been able to do.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. And I think, it demonstrated what could happen when we align around public, interest of world health. I mean, all segments of the economy of, the world, all segments were impacted by this pandemic. And quite, it's like quite remarkable to even think about shutting down the economy. And, like you and I in our lifetime didn't experience shortage until now, right?
Yep.
And of course our parents were like, oh heck yeah, there was all kind of shortage during World War II, and we were like, oh, ancient history, that would never happen again, right? But then all of a sudden, like, a panic ensued when you couldn't get toilet paper, and you know
Yeah.
so the impacts of it were so broad and hurtful of so many people, that I think people came together in a really miraculous moment to try and solve that problem. And I'm sad that we'll go back, to we'll go back to a state where public health and safety of and efficacy of medicines, we'll go back to that competition place, because it's not been a good place. You have
No.
ethical players, and then you have unethical players. You have competitive players that will put profit ahead. I was really fortunate to work for a company that was, very profitable, but very much around, make the best medicine, have the best science. And that was a wonderful place to work. You felt proud to go and work there every day. Whereas I've heard different things from people, at different organizations. But I mean, I hope we don't swing the whole way back to where that was.
I I agree. I want us to take with us going forward some of the lessons that I think we've learned. Like, we can still stay connected and be socially isolated, which is, I think that was the most striking as an Myers-Briggs extrovert. It was a challenge. So I started these little check-ins, video check-ins, Facebook check-ins, just with friends or just whoever I saw on Facebook. And it wasn't, it was really meaningful, and it did accomplish that notion that we're together. And even, producing art and creating things, that was a struggle for so many people. And look how many industries, Broadway, music, concerts, etc. But there were so many people creating and collaborating online.
Yeah.
And no, it's not the same as being there, but boy, was it a great compliment to, keep us going forward.
Yeah, what's possible. Some of my most favorite, my favorite videos from that time are the choral or musical collaborations where you see a Zoom with, 25 people on, or however many can get on a screen, and they're singing in harmony. They're producing a musical piece in harmony, and everyone's in their own living room, doing their music. And that was just really inspiring to me, that kind of thing can be done. It was funny, just today we were having a conversation about, we always had our board meetings in person here on, campus or in another location in person. And the in person was like so important and so critical. And, we started to talk about how, yeah, but it might be both and. We might be able to be more inclusive, for example, of people with young families or large travel requirements that can't take a week off to come to a board meeting, if we did some type of mixed approach, which would have never been, never even been thought of until the medium was challenged by COVID. And I've worked for global companies, and so it's not really foreign concept for global company. Someone's working in a global company, because I collaborated with people in Singapore and Malaysia and Japan and Germany and Italy, and I never met them in person, because you couldn't afford to, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I think we learned that there is an easier way to, like, you and I didn't have to come together physically to have this like amazing conversation that's good,
Right.
for both of us, hopefully for your listeners, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I agree. I really hope that we take morsels with us. So before we wrap, um, can you think of, I know you gave some examples. Is there anything else that you can think of that you could say, and this, without a doubt, if we didn't collaborate, this would not have happened?
well, not to make it all about COVID, but that has consumed our life for the last
Yeah,
14 months.
absolutely.
And but on our campus, as well as those collaborations we did outside the campus, but on our campus, we had a group of people who, like, in nature wouldn't have worked together, right? Like the natural, we had we had a guy who's a herpetologist who heads up our health and safety. We had someone from our events planning. We had myself. We had a business faculty member. We had this group of people from all over the institution that met, marketing and communications. We still meet in fact, we now feel that we're a support group, but we met every morning, because, as you know, the news about COVID evolved every day, like, and we're not used to knowledge changing that quickly. Certainly in this industry, right?
Yeah.
But just in general in society. Like, I felt that in the first, 6 months of COVID, US employment law and benefits law changed more quickly than in the 30 years I worked in corporate America, right? In those 6 months. And so you needed a lot of people to keep up with it. You needed people to come together and generate creative ideas on how to solve a problem that just arose yesterday or earlier, this morning or whatever. How are we going to handle this? What happens when this happens? How are we going to, put policy in place about this? Are we going to allow travel? Are we going to, just all these things that, like, you had to address that you never would have even had to contemplate before. And it's been one of the most effective teams I've ever worked on, because we were all different levels. Like, two of us were cabinet level, other people were like at the administrative level, and there were no levels. There were no, nobody was an expert in COVID. Nobody came into the room as an expert in COVID, right? Some people were better at science than others, but but from our areas, we all had something to contribute. We all could read the public, discourse around things. We all stayed up to date on, the Pennsylvania website and what the governor was saying, and so I think that totally, like, we didn't always agree, we are still not agreeing on some things because there's no right answer just yet. But we came together, we could have constructive dialogue, we had mutual respect, and we were solving a problem that was, like, seriously impactful to all of us, right? Personally, professionally, our institution, our community outside of the college. We were trying to also protect the Huntington community. And we really cared about all of that. It was very mission driven, in what we were doing.
Yeah. A little distracted. We just had a little visitor.
Rafi.
Rafi.
There he is.
But yeah, it's so fascinating to me that our worst moment has, and also been our greatest moment.
Yeah.
As a country, as a community of business, as the various sectors, we have that is the American spirit. I mean, it is comforting that we haven't lost that.
Right.
That when you look back at what you said and what we've seen and what we've accomplished, it is amazing. In a year and 2 months having vaccinations, and I know there's lots of debate on that, but science, truth,
Yeah.
facts, information. I'm willing to go with the experts.
Yeah.
That's why they're experts and I'm not. So it used to be that, those who had more expertise and knowledge were deferred to.
Right. They
But
called
now
it.
it's like, oh, I have a different view, so my voice is equal? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that was interesting. I found that early on in the vaccination, before the vaccines were actually developed, I was a little skeptical, right? Because I had worked in pharma and I was like, show me the clinical data before, I'm not going to be first in line, but I'm not going to be last either, And as that information evolved and we understood that there are now new methods of evaluating safety and efficacy of
mhm.
medicines than there were 20 years ago, right? And now that's probably going to be another benefit of quote benefit of COVID is that we can challenge the former assumptions about how long things take to do,
Absolutely.
right? Because
Absolutely.
and we were talking about this in one of my classes because one of my students was a biology student, pre-med, and we were talking like, okay, so these students are all born in what, 1997, 98. And I'm like, you guys, do you realize like the human genome was mapped in your lifetime? And the difference between before that happened and now, and what that means for even our availability or our ability to develop a vaccination is huge,
Yeah.
right? It's huge. We have a better idea of how medicines will affect people based on their, basic biology.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that 20 years ago. Like, that was crazy town to think about that, but you can do it now. And this has like accelerated it, right? It has mainstreamed our ability to do that.
Well, this has been great. And as you said, a
We could probably
great,
talk all afternoon as
yeah,
we
we
go.
could. It's a great example of collaboration and working on that one goal, which has been to really help folks who are watching or listening and reading to understand that this notion of community is really, really important, whether you're in for-profit or not-for-profit, and that we can really do this and work together, and the benefits are immeasurable and invaluable. And thank you so much for taking some time to remind us about that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm delighted to help you all, obviously and always. But I think that I think it's a great topic that you're on, and you're doing great work around it. So
Thank you.
thanks for having me.
Sure. So you've been listening to Office Hours with the Practical Prof and Friends, and my friend, this episode has been Tracy Grajewski, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer at Juniata College. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.